Good evening. This is Maestro Cortella with a Dawn of War 2 Retribution Elite modcast. Today we have a 1v1 on Ashes of Typhon. Our first player today is Hobbes-San. Hobbes is playing as Sindri, Trollface, Chaos Sorcerer. The Sorcerer is a spell-casting hero. He shoots out powerful doom bolts. He has a lot of teleportation capabilities. He can also snare and manipulate. And this is a Thousand Suns Chaos Sorcerer. Next up, we've got my friend, the eco-friendly Protagonist, playing as the Commissar Lord. The Commissar Lord is a slightly tanky melee hero. He has a free energy shield, and he can also buff his own troops by shooting them in the head, because he's a boss like that. Alright, so we've got a 1v1 here, some slightly different names. Hobbes is a player who I've only seen around fairly recently. He plays the Sorcerer, and he's pretty good with him. And then Protagonist is also... Protagonist has definitely been around. He's definitely been in casts. He's pretty solid. He's also a really cool guy and a pretty smart dude. He's doing like a master's thesis and stuff. But, this is like a... Both these players here are pretty good, but not exactly top players. Better than average. And I've played them both, of course. Definitely played Protagonist a lot. Well, actually, lately I've been playing Hobbes more, but I've played Protagonist. I've seen him around for a while. And lately he's kind of had my number with his Commissar Lord. His Commissar is pretty solid, and I'm guessing that's his main hero, since that's what he seems to be the best with. And Hobbes is someone I've also been playing. Both these players like kind of around my level. Hobbes tend to go back and forth. Sometimes it's me winning a lot, sometimes it's him winning a lot. And since Protagonist has kind of had my number, I'd be interested to see what Hobbes would do differently. And this is a matchup. The traditional knowledge is that Chaos is strongly favored against Imperial Guard. I've been rethinking that lately. In particular, this double Sentinel build, I feel, is actually very, very strong against Chaos in the early game. And I think the way Toylali used to play this matchup back in retail was that he would pretty much just use a double Sentinel build and win the game early on in Tier 1. Just the pressure of double Sentinels. I mean, double Sentinels is a good build in general, and I feel it's particularly strong against Chaos, since they don't really have a lot of early range DPS. Now, Hobbes, interestingly, he has not opted to get either a second Heretics or a second Chaos Space Marine squad, and instead he's teched straight into a Havoc, so that's a pretty interesting choice. Now, a Havoc can definitely be very good in this matchup for suppressing Guardsmen, limiting the space that a Sentinel can move around in. But I feel it's sometimes difficult to make just a single Havoc work when there are two Sentinels, and an Imperial Guard player can definitely use the positioning of having the two Sentinels in different places as a way of countering the Havoc. Now, this Havoc was also countered by the multi-laser turret, and it lost 2 models to that. The multi-laser turret is something that I would say is actually pretty good against a setup team, because it can't be suppressed. It's not going to take that much damage from the Havoc. And we see Protagonist with a lot of early pressure, and this is actually so far not too dissimilar from what I saw in the game I cast of Farzo versus Freeman. And I'd say Farzo versus Freeman are a bit better than these players, but we're seeing something similar in that the Imperial Guard player is really getting a lot of early pressure. So much early pressure that the Chaos player can't get 2 VPs, and the Imperial Guard player starts out with a pretty big lead in VPs. Now, this is just how things start out. I generally also find that come Tier 2 and the late game Tier 3, if players go to Tier 3, it tends to even out a bit, if not go in the Chaos player's favor. Now, Noise Marines are something in particular that can be pretty difficult to deal with for Imperial Guard if you don't get a double Sentinel build, but double Sentinels are pretty strong against Noise Marines, since Noise Marines don't have a whole lot of range. They're not going to do a lot of damage to the Sentinel, and the Sentinel can really micro away lead models off the Noise Marines before they can really do much. But Noise Marines are very strong against all Imperial Guard squads. And the combination, generally the limitation of Noise Marines is their range, but if you use a Havoc, that can usually suppress squads, and that helps the Noise Marines to get into range pretty safely. Now, we do see some of this, the combination of the Havoc and the Noise Marine pressure here, which can be pretty good. Wow, actually already enough red to use Commissar Flare, and I'd say that's a pretty good time to use a Commissar Flare. And now there actually is a lot of range damage to pressure these Sentinels off. Protagonist is actually losing his power farm. He's losing it a lot, although Hobbes has lost some models. He's definitely bleeding models off of squads. I think he'll be lucky to get this Chaos Space Marine squad out of there, and he does. See, this suppression right here is going to be pretty easy pickings for the Noise Marines to walk in. And luckily for him, he actually managed to get the Noise Marines out of there without losing a single model. Ooh, pretty brazen just trying to walk around the Sentinel firing arc like that. So he's got one Sentinel behind the Havoc, and he's going to use a Stomp. Maybe if he's lucky, he can get another model kill on that. So the Sentinel not terribly powerful in terms of the DPS it does. And if anything, I mean, Hobbes has in a way, he got a kind of lucky not losing as many models as he did. I think he just lost a single Chaos Space Marine model. I think he was pretty lucky to not lose any Noise Marine models, and he only lost one Havoc model as well. So Protagonist has suffered more of the power bashes, and in spite of that, he's actually getting to tier 2 first, although for actually pretty predictable and easy to spot reasons. Mainly that his build, he has invested very, very little power into this build. The only power he has invested has been in the 2 Sentinel Stomps. And his build isn't even that expensive on requisition either. Unfortunately, I don't think the Commissar Lord by himself here is really that great of an idea, but he was probably just backcapping, certainly not going to fight all of this stuff by himself. Well, certainly not going to fight the Havoc. I think the Havoc is the main thing that puts a wrench in that plan. Otherwise, the Commissar Lord can actually be pretty beastly, just running in, trying to tie up Havocs or Noise Marines. And he can activate his energy shield to make it so that he does not get affected by Cacophony. And that would actually be pretty bad for the Noise Marines, because then they're just standing there, using their ability, getting hit. Would it be especially bad if the Commissar Lord has an upgraded weapon, but Protagonist is probably saving up for... Ooh, that's not such good positioning, having the guardsmen in front, because that makes them vulnerable to whatever's coming out of infiltration. Generally, it's more helpful to have the Sentinels in front, because they're the ones that can tank more damage. They're not going to bleed, and Hobbes actually spots this power farm, and he's got... This is pretty nice coverage. He's got the Noise Marines bashing, while the Havocs are protecting the approach. Now, Protagonist also just upgraded to dual Sentinel missile launchers, but he doesn't know where all this stuff is. He doesn't know that this Havoc is here. If he knows where that Havoc is, some quick barrages from these double Sentinels with this Havoc having less than half health would possibly wipe it, certainly do a lot of damage, certainly make it come very close. Unfortunately, he's going to approach right into the Havoc. That's a risky play, but he's immediately going to shoot some missile launchers, and the volleys from both of them. He needs to try to shoot another volley while he still knows where that Havoc is. Pretty close call. If he had gotten both of those volleys off, that could have been the end of that. Unfortunately, he lost more power, and that's definitely one of the great things about having Noise Marines. Noise Marines can definitely help you keep a power advantage, and I think there have definitely been times when people have said that the Chaos economy is not that strong, and that's especially true with multiple Heretic builds. Missiles, unfortunately, shooting a little high and miss. Meanwhile, it looks like we had a Dark Flames right there against these Guardsman squads that seem to be pushing their luck. And here we're going to have a Sentinel Stomp. It's a little bit harder to hit those Noise Marines if they're moving around with the missile launcher, but they do get out of there. Still have not lost a single model, though. And Hobbes now going for a Dreadnought. He's also upgrading to Khorne Chaos Space Marines, and there have been a lot of talk about Khorne Chaos Space Marines and how good they are or not. And there are certain they're like very situational uses for them, but Imperial Guard against Imperial Guard is actually one of the situations where Khorne Chaos Space Marines are actually very good. Although I'd say a double Sentinel build, actually I'd say it'd still be probably pretty good against them. Khorne Chaos Space Marines, certainly they're going to win against Guardsmen in melee, although if anything right now I'd say the Guardsmen are the biggest threat to the Khorne Chaos Space Marines. Since with plasma guns, the Khorne Chaos, the Guardsmen are the squad that are going to do the most damage to the Khorne Chaos Space Marines and force them off that way. However, it looks like that Guardsman squad right there took a lot of damage, maybe even some friendly fire from the Sentinel missile launcher. But the Khorne Chaos Space Marines, certainly if they get into melee with the Guardsmen, it's a clear win for them. They're actually very good for hunting down Sentinels because they do a lot of range damage to the Sentinels with their plasma pistols. And if they can get in melee, they'll of course do a lot of damage. The main thing they have to worry about is not getting stomped. But it's entirely possible to bait out the Sentinel stomp by running in and then running out, especially since Khorne Chaos Space Marines are very fast. And another great thing about Khorne Chaos Space Marines is that they can solo the Commissar. And that might not seem like such a big thing, but it is actually a huge deal that you can have one unit that can take on the Commissar all by themselves with relatively low risk. If the Commissar has an upgraded weapon, he'll probably bleed one model off of the Khorne Chaos Space Marines. One, maybe two if he's lucky. But otherwise, the fact that the Khorne Chaos Space Marines can solo the Commissar is actually a big deal. The Commissar Lord is definitely one of the things that can actually be most annoying and most threatening in this matchup. Mostly, in part because the Sorcerer struggles with single entities in general, especially melee single entities, and the tankier they are, generally the bigger their problem they are. And although the Commissar isn't the tankiest melee hero, with an upgraded weapon, he does enough damage to still be a threat, and there's still not too many things that can take him on just one-to-one, like just by itself, that can solo him. So Khorne Chaos Space Marines are one thing. And Khorne Chaos Space Marines as a squad, they have less risk than some of the other options, like a melee Dreadnought. Wow, this Tzeentch Dreadnought is done. Just one more missile hit should do it. But we also, wow, a lot of things going on in that engagement. Doombolts combined with a Dark Flame take out one of the Guardsman squads, but losing that Tzeentch Dreadnought so early like that is such a big loss. And here we actually see the way the Khorne Space Marines can solo the Commissar Lord. And that should be it. That takes him out. That's something that's actually really big in this matchup. And that's a real big difference compared to other tanky melee heroes. Because you can't use Khorne Chaos Space Marines to do that against a Force Commander, or a Chaos Lord, or a Hive Tyrant. Because they'll get disrupted by some disruption ability, and those single entities are also a bit tougher than the Commissar Lord. And the Khorne Chaos Space Marines did not even lose a model, in part because they got special attacks. Khorne Chaos Space Marines are actually pretty good at getting special attacks, it seems. And one of the other things I like about getting them in this matchup is that they can be pretty good for dealing with Ogryns. Ooh, some missiles going into those heretics. Those heretics cannot stick around. But here we see that the VPs are starting to even out a bit in Hobbes' favor. Not exactly in his favor yet, but they're starting to go back in his favor. He's got a triple cap. It's 203 to 313. And that's considering that... that's really considering that Protagonist had a huge advantage. I believe he had an over 200-point VP lead. Now, Protagonist has invested in the Power Sword. I don't know if he used Lead by Example, but it looks like he's... Well, the Power Sword we can already see is doing a much better job than just the default sword, but he's still going to lose the Commissar again. So that's 2 Commissar losses in pretty quick succession. VPs are actually now really close to even, and will pretty soon be pretty much even. The Chaos Space Marines did lose 2 models that time, but they were going into that engagement with less health than before, since they still lost health from their first engagement with the Commissar, and the Commissar at that time did have an upgraded weapon. That being said, they still lost 2 models. That's less of a... It's going to cost less to replace those 2 models than it is to replace the Commissar Lord. Another Dark Flames. We're seeing a lot of Dark Flames, and the Dark Flames, I approve of the use of Dark Flames that Hobbes is doing, even though it's slightly different from what I generally do. He has gotten some squad wipes out of it. He's usually doing it like right after a Doom Bolts when those squads are already really hurting, and he's definitely threatening that squad wipe, even if he doesn't always get it. I usually reserve it for exclusively when a squad wipe is going to be guaranteed. Ooh, missiles going in. Take out more than half of that Havoc's health, and more missiles going in. Wow. So those do a lot of damage. Certainly the Sentinel with oh, that's going to be nice. He should definitely try to... I feel like he should go back in there. He just dropped down those mines, but Hobbes can see all those mines. I think he should detonate the mines. Ah, but instead he switched to the crack missile. So he's prioritizing taking out the Dreadnought. Unfortunately, this front Sentinel is way too exposed, and it's going to go down. So unfortunately, just no micro right there. It just sent that thing dying. Meanwhile, Commissar is away. He's doing backcapping, doing map control, trying to stay in the game on VPs. Unfortunately, that means that Hobbes keeps up the pressure over here. VPs are now pretty much even, 187 to 206. Protagonist still with the slight lead, but I don't know how long he's going to hold on to that. Ooh, and that was actually a very close call for these Havocs. They ran through some mines and pretty low on health. I think if they had run through this patch of mines right here, they could have gotten wiped. So I think he was just a little bit lucky that the pattern of those mines and the line of those mines did not completely overlap with that retreat path. We're seeing some good use of worship, and Hobbes is pretty good with his worship. As players, we do seem to be like pretty much on each other's level, but I think his use of worship is a bit better than mine. And Commissar goes down again. That's the third time I've seen the Commissar go down. Gets tossed aside. So unfortunately, Protagonist, he did have a strong start, but I almost feel part of what's going on is that he seems to just kind of be dropping things. Like he's just seems to be just dropping the ball, basically. He's pretty low on squads. He's got a las cannon heavy weapon team, which he did use to take out that first Dreadnought. And now we've got 3 Dreadnoughts. Well, we've got a 3rd Dreadnought, but only 2 of them still alive. Doubles each Dreadnought. That's actually pretty intense as far as vehicles go. And this is actually now, although Hobbes still is behind in VPs, he still has not had the VP, he still doesn't have the double cap. He's in a very strong position compositionally and just as far as engagements go. My God! That was actually a pretty close call for these Noise Marines. So Hobbes may be about to get a double cap, but I don't think he's had the VP lead yet. And we actually see a weapon switch on the Noise Marines to a Blastmaster to turn them like into a plasma cannon. It can both be very good against Imperial Guard and yet at the same time not so good. Right now I'm going to say it's probably a really good choice. Certainly if the Blastmaster actually hits something, especially a Guardsman squad, it's going to hit it really hard, take out like 80% of the squad's health, and kill a bunch of models. But what I'd say is not so good about it is that you're turning a mobile ranged unit into a static setup unit. And normally sometimes that can actually play into the Commissar's hands. Although right now with the way things are going, well, the Commissar's dead for one. And just the way things have been managed in this game, I think Protagonist might have a bit of an advantage here. However, some things have happened that first of all, I wasn't watching, but Hobbes lost his Horncast Space Marines up here, and he also just lost that Dreadnought in that engagement right there. I guess, well, the las cannon probably did do a lot of damage, even though it eventually did get warped out. And the Sentinel was, of course, firing its missiles. Sorcerer goes down, though. That was a pretty nice, just a pretty good he just took an opportunity with Hobbes keeping that Sorcerer out there with not a whole lot of health. So he was able to sort of flank with the Stormtroopers and just catch that Sorcerer in a really bad position. But Hobbes now finally does have his VP lead, 137 to 90. And he's got double dreadnoughts. Man, he really just likes to keep going with dreadnoughts. And now, so this is his 4th dreadnought, and this one is a Khorne dreadnought. We have a level 3 Heavy Bolter Havoc, and it's amazing to see a level 3 Heavy Bolter Havoc. And what's probably been going on there is that the Havoc has been kind of getting credit for kills where it suppressed blobs of guardsmen, and then those guardsmen eventually got hit by things like Doom Bolts and Dark Flames. Probably like the combination of that. Now, Ogrins are running in. They are going to get disrupted by the Noise Marines and actually take a lot of damage. So they're staying in here, but oh, they might actually wipe out the Blastmaster Noise Marine. No, that was a little bit of a shame there. They certainly can't stick around in the face of a Khorne Dreadnought. A Khorne Dreadnought will counter Ogrins, but I think that was a big mistake turning away from the Noise Marines. I think his best chance there and the best win he could have gotten out of that engagement would have been basically the possibility of wiping the Noise Marines. And we had another Dreadnought go down. Now, interestingly, I'm not seeing any Warp Global from Hobbes. He could have saved... Wow, and he just lost 2 Dreadnoughts. These Dreadnoughts all seem like they're dying a lot sooner than they should, but I don't know if I'm just not watching it. Certainly the Imperial Guard heavy weapon team is pretty powerful. In retail, it was the most powerful las cannon. I think in Elite that was changed so that the Chaos las cannon is on par. I don't actually know if the Space Marine las cannon is on par. Sorcerer goes down again. So in the late game of this, the play is starting to get a little sloppy, I feel. But both players having lost things. Hobbes has gone through like 4 Dreadnoughts. He's like Advanced Stubbs, but with Dreadnoughts. We've got a late multi-laser turret. I don't feel that that's such a great idea. With the Blastmaster can just shoot at it from like maximum range. Does not even really need to see it. Just needs to attack ground. And I mean things like Dark Flames would probably take out the multi-laser turret pretty easily. So yeah, we're just gonna see. Oh, the Blastmaster is not going for the multi-laser turret. I also feel like the multi-laser turret doesn't do quite as much damage. Grenade goes in. Pretty lucky. And unfortunately, the Blastmaster misses. But Hobbes, not with a very close call on his Heretics. Ooh, the detonation on those Commissar mines, pretty dangerous. And the Sorcerer gets revived. We have some more Commissar mines going in. That might actually be able to prevent the cap if they arm quickly enough, because usually there's some arming time before they start activating. But there, you don't need to wait for arming time if you got a Sentinel to detonate them. Triple cap now for Protagonist. Some of the mines are armed and they are getting detonated. Hobbes is still going for this VP. He's running out of time, but he's going to lose his Havoc if he's not careful. If anything, he got lucky because some of those missiles missed. If those missiles were dead on, that probably would have been a dead Havoc. Noise Marines now setting up, but the Sentinel should have the advantage over them. And here is this the 5th Dreadnought? Now, Ogrins do pretty much get countered by a Blood Rage Core Dreadnought, but we've also got some support from other things. Well, the Commissar Lord still just has a Power Sword, and the Sorcerer teleports in. So this time we actually saved the Khorne Dreadnought, not using the Warp Global, just kind of engaging the other things, lasting out just toughing out the Ogrins, as well as eventually tying up the heavy weapon team and forcing it off. That should be a wipe on this Commissar again. That's like the 4th or 5th time he's been down. So Hobbes is about to have a double cap. He's definitely lower on VPs, 29 to 70. But we've still got Protagonist in his base, and lately the engagements haven't quite been going in his favor, I think. I think right now, with the way these engagements are going, the combination of the Ogrins and the Las Cannon is not enough. Oh, unless we have an executed Las Cannon, that might just be enough to do it. Except the Las Cannon now has its line of sight blocked. He needs to draw it, move it, to get it to move up so that the Las Cannon can shoot again. Wow, that was actually really, really unfortunate. And this could be a turning point right here. Because I feel like that executed heavy weapon team should have been able to finish off the Dreadnought in combination with the Ogrins. But then he unfortunately set it up in a position where it had its line of sight blocked. Wow, and if anything, he might lose the Ogrins now. He is going to lose the Ogrins. The Ogrins go down, so unfortunately just a little bit, and it's just a little tiny mistake that practically ended up costing him the game. Well, that time line of sight wasn't blocked, and even though it looked like it should have been. Bloodletters wipe out the heavy weapon team. Now, I mean, wow, that missile was really awkward. But, something like that, just what happened there with Protagonist, setting up his heavy weapon team in a position where their line of sight was blocked. That was something that really, like, that could like cost him the game. Because he probably would have still had his heavy weapon team, he probably still would have had his Ogrins if that had not happened, and Hobbes would have lost his Dreadnought. Hobbes lost his Dreadnought in the end, but with the way it got drawn out, it also resulted in Protagonist losing his Ogrins as well as his heavy weapon team. And not that there are any vehicles left for the heavy weapon team to target, but the heavy weapon team can then be the one to go on captain duty. So Bloodletters might go down here, but I think they're buying Hobbes some time. Buying Hobbes the time he needs to not lose the game. The Havocs might go down as well, and Protagonist is trying to move these units up to cap. Unfortunately, they are not going to be able to cap under a Blastmaster fire. I think what needs to happen... Oh no, he's going to get shot. He's going to get all these squads hit by Blastmaster. No, we got really lucky right there. Actually, there's a Commissar right here that I didn't even see. But here is a Summoning Circle Global, and combined with that Warp Fire, that could... It looks like that is pretty much going to prevent a Protagonist from getting the cap right here. Or he's going to need to put the Commissar on right now. Leave the energy shield up, put the Commissar there right now. Instead, he's fighting Bloodletters that he really should not be fighting. He's going for the cap. It's really close. 29 to 3. Oh, 29 to 2. We've got the Sorcerer just like smacking these stormtroopers. You can kind of hear like the smack sound if you listen really closely of that staff. And that's actually, those mines actually proving to be pretty big, because that results in a wipe on the Sorcerer. Otherwise, I think the Sorcerer would have taken the advantage in those fights. We've now, this is like Hobbes' 6th Dreadnought. Hobbes is going all in though. He's losing most of his squads. The Chaos Dreadnought, I think, is in a really bad position. It's going forward, but you know, it doesn't even matter. The game is over. And Protagonist takes it. Alright. Well, hope you enjoyed the cast. Have a good night.